Hello, I'm Annie Chipola, Senior Librarian for the John C. Fremont branch of Los Angeles Public Library, and I'm here to introduce today's LA Made program. First, we want to thank the National Endowment for the Humanities, our Library Foundation, and our behind-the-scenes staff for helping to bring the LA Made programs to you virtually. We hope everyone checks out our amazing offerings on our online calendar at lapl.org/events. Also, many of our branches are now hosting special LA Made programs, including Westchester Loyola branch, who is hosting Christine Chu Chinese traditional music on Saturday, February 6th at 2 p.m. You can see all of the upcoming LA Made programs at lapl.org/LAMade. Our next Thursday LA Made program will feature Mariachi Arcoiris de Los Angeles on February 11 at 4 p.m. Mariachi Arcoiris de Los Angeles, the world's first LGBTQ+ mariachi, brings Mexican music and folklore to Southern California by performing its repertoire to suit the LGBTQ+ community. The program will be followed by a Q&A with the director, Carlos Samaniego. Now on to today's LA Made. LA Made focuses on the diverse landscape of Los Angeles, highlighting the immense artistic and performance talent that has developed in the course of the city's eclectic history. Today's LA Made program is Modern Calligraphy with Debby Reelitz. Since the advent of email, handwritten letters have become a lost art. We're hoping to inspire you to revive the practice and to turn your snail mail into mail art by learning the popular and playful modern calligraphy. Debby Reelitz is an experienced lettering artist with more than 20 years of experience. She will teach us where this style comes from, strategies on how to create the lettering style, and projects to use the skills you're about to acquire. We are so excited to welcome Debby Reelitz. Hi, Debby.
Thank you so much for including me in your time this afternoon. It is a real honor and a real privilege to be able to talk about lettering with all of you. I'm in a day and age where we have instant communication, and it's so easy to send a text message or to send an email. We have communication at our fingertips. And so our society as a whole, we've done communication amazingly well. But the thing that still keeps the lettering arts alive is the need for connection. And one of the things I love about something that is hand lettered is that we are providing an opportunity to connect with others. Because when I give something that I have written or I have made to somebody else, my love, my energy has been included in that. And that is something that a, print button on a computer just, can't do. And so I love the fact that calligraphy isn't going to go away because of the power that it has to connect us. And we'll be talking about that tonight, because I want you to not only learn this lettering style, but I want you to be able to put it out into the world. So at the end of the class, we'll also talk about ways that you can use it to be able to share that love and that joy and that care you have for other people. So, all right, you guys are here for us for a modern calligraphy class. So what is it? The nice thing about modern calligraphy is that there's actually lots of ways it can be done. Okay, so tonight's class, I'm going to be specifically demonstrating with what's called a Tombow marker. It's a dual tip. We're going to be using the the thick end of it. We're not going to use the thin end, okay? But even if you don't have this, you can do it if you have a paintbrush. This is another form of a paintbrush. It's called a water brush. Or if all you have is a pen or a pencil, you can still absolutely take this class with us, okay? So there's many different ways that modern calligraphy can be created, which is wonderful because it's got so much flexibility on how it's done. The other thing is, I don't know if you, as you go out into the world, but it's everywhere. It's like all over. So the modern calligraphy has become very pervasive out there. What I've done is I've captured a few of the things that have come across my doorstep. Here is a card that came from Habitat for Humanity. And again, it's got one style of modern calligraphy. There's just many, there's infinite styles, truly. Here's a lovely little piece of a holiday card that came. And one of the nice things you can see is that, you know, it's not always perfectly straight across. There's got some dance to the letters. And so there's some variation there, which also makes it very forgiving, so that when we were learning and things don't quite turn out just right, nobody knows that you didn't do it intentionally. And then, you know, here's just a totally different variation of a modern calligraphy. And one of the things, just to be able to see, when we look at modern calligraphy, it's got two really distinctive elements. It's got its thicks, and then it's got its thins, okay? So it's got its thins, like it's going in, and then it's got its thick components. And that's fundamentally what we're going to be talking about, is how to get, where do we use the thicks, where do we use the thins, and how do we do that, okay? So we talked that there's different tools to be able to create it. And even here, you guys can kind of see on my back wall. This is, you're in my studio. This is where I teach when I could do in-person classes. But I got really lucky this past summer. I got a really wonderful commission to letter on a church's walls in Bethel, Connecticut. And so most of my time I'm looking down at a board. So I'm not always working up and down on a wall. So I wanted to practice before I got to the church, obviously. So I've got a sample of some of my practice. And if you look at it, we've got thicks and we've got thins. We've got thicks and then we've got thins. That's fundamentally what we are going to be learning how to do in the class today. Now, I'm just going to take a slight little detour because even though it's called modern calligraphy, I want to just share a little treasure with you. Can you guys see this? It has the word autograph on the cover. I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up and I was a little girl, I had an autograph book. And I had my friends sign it. I had my teacher sign it. I even took it to Disney, and I think I've got a Goofy signature in my autograph book. But this autograph book has been handed down from a retiring calligrapher. And I want to share a couple pages on this little treasure with you. All right. So it is an autograph book from a student at a business college in upstate New York. And you can see he's listed his fellow students and the fact that they've come from all across the country. Okay, so that's just a glimmer. All right. So let me turn to a page in the autograph book. I've picked pages that hopefully the lettering is dark enough that you can see it and kind of enjoy it. Okay, so we have, I hope you guys can see that there is a date at the bottom, and it says 1877. So this autograph book is from a while ago, to put it lightly, but I want you to just notice that it's got the thicks and the thins on its lettering, just like we're going to have on our modern calligraphy tonight. Okay, I'm going to show you one more page just for perspective. And one of the things that I really love about this is that even though we had the printing press, the handwritten word was still critical for success in business. And as the handwritten word is critical for success in business, and not only so that way you can keep your books and do your communication and all that stuff, but if you couldn't do it yourself, you had to hire somebody. So I love that little bit of history, that handwriting was essential. But the other thing to keep in mind about why would a business person want to have beautiful handwriting? It becomes a way to connect. Again, there's that connection that comes with the handwritten word. And having something that is beautiful, you've taken the time to create something beautiful, even if it's for a business associate. That has an impact. Okay, and that's why handwriting was still so highly valued, even though it was the business world. All right, thank you for letting me take my little detour. What I'm going to do next is we are going to drop down to my desk so that way you guys can see where I'm going to be lettering and I'm going to be demonstrating. I'm hoping that you guys had a chance to print out. There's 3 different handouts on in preparation for the class. All right, and if you don't have them, you can. They've got a I think there's a link in the chat where you can get the handouts, and you can at least view it if you can have a shared screen on it. But we're going to talk about it. You can even look at what I have down on my board if you don't have it with me. And know that if you're going to be working with a pencil, just draw the letters instead of using the marker. All right, so let's get to it. All right. So we have our brush marker is our tool of choice for tonight. I'm going to first just start off with a scrap piece of paper. I'm a big fan of keeping the trees in the forest as much as I possibly can, so I try to reuse my paper on the back side of things. Okay. Now, with modern calligraphy, there are 3 primary skills that we need to learn. So there is what's called the full pressure stroke, okay, where I'm hopefully getting a consistent thickness all the way from the top to the bottom. The second stroke is a floating stroke where I'm very light on the brush. And then the third skill is to do a taper, where I am transitioning from a full pressure to a no pressure stroke. The taper is a harder stroke to create. So our first focus is going to be on just getting used to the full pressure stroke and the no pressure stroke. And then once we get a little more familiar with our writing tool, then we'll talk about the taper. All right. So when I work with my brush, I'm going to, first off, I'm a huge fan of the good old traditional way of holding a pen, where we've got one boss. Nowadays, since they don't do a lot of teaching with handwriting, I see all sorts of handholds on the pencil, everything's out there. But I think most people can agree is that having more than one boss in your work life is too much, right? So I don't want to have 3 bosses on my pen. I really don't want to have 2 bosses on my pen. I really only want to have one boss on my writing instrument. So what my pointer finger does is that is the control. That's the one that's doing the fine motor movements. My thumb is there as a pivot point. Now I can use my middle finger, but just as a resting spot. Okay, so it just takes off some of the pressure. But the one boss is my pointer. Okay. Now, the other thing is the position of where your brush is pointing. So when I am doing a full pressure stroke, I'm going to point my nib to the left side of my paper, almost like it's going straight across that way. What I want to do is I want to press on the side of the brush and then pull down and then lift up. I want it to be a very deliberate stroke. So I'm going to press, pull down, lift up. I know that might sound super wicked easy, but what happens is that if I'm going fast, I often end up with a ragged edge where it's not even, okay? And I want to be very deliberate with my start, my pull stroke, and then my lift up. So that way, again, I have an even thickness all the way through the stroke, okay? Now, if you are left-handed, you will be pointing towards the right side, okay? Don't try to hold it exactly the same way. Oftentimes when I say point to the upper left, you're going to be pointing to the lower right. I will try to address that for lefties as far as another way to try it. Okay, so then we have our full pressure stroke. Now for our no pressure stroke, we want to turn our pen upwards. So that way I'm working mostly on the tip. So I just want to see how lightly I can float on the page. I just want to be as light as possible. I'm so light that some of my lines didn't go, and that's wonderful. It's great to have those missing lines because it means that you really are floating very lightly on the page. Okay, so that's a very important, that's very valuable if you're so light, it doesn't even show up. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to just take a minute or so and do some full pressure strokes. See if you can get a consistent width. And then I want you to do some floating strokes. It doesn't even need to be, doesn't need to create anything, doesn't need to make sense, but I just want you to get the feel as to how different they are. The other thing is just remember, you are not a superhero as you press down on your pen. So don't use your superpowers tonight. You can save those for another time. It is just a gentle touch on the side of your brush, just enough to get a tiny bit of a bend in the brush, but you don't need to be too heavy on the marker itself.
Debbie, I have a question coming in about the heavier stroke. Someone is saying that when she gets to the bottom, it's either pointed or heavier.
that is ultimately the hardest part of getting used to this, because what happens is that when we write with a pen or a pencil, I can work with my fingertips or my wrist, and I still get the same line as I go across the page. But if I control the pen with my fingertips, see how I can't get a solid line going all the way down. So if I'm using my fingertips, I end up getting a ragged edge. So what I recommend doing is slide your whole hand down the page. So slide, and then hopefully that'll enable you to have an even pressure all the way down. But my fingertips, my fingers and my wrists aren't moving. So I'm actually, even though it's not a big stroke, I'm actually pivoting from my shoulder. But my hand is sliding, the whole hand is sliding down the page. Okay. All right. So the next step is to start combining the thicks with the thins. Okay, so this is where we are going to pull out our exemplar with the capital letters. Now, please remember these, or keep in mind, these letters are designed to help us build skill. They're not overly fancy. They're just really here to help us get comfortable with a whole new tool. We're just used to using a single point. And when I apply pressure to it, I still get that single point. Where here, it's a totally different device. So what you can see, like on the I through the F, we have two kinds of strokes. We have our full pressure strokes and then our no pressure strokes. So that's why everything's out of order. So all the alphabet is totally out of order, so that way we put similar letters and skills together. Okay. Now, you can practice it. You can practice these capitals on a blank piece of paper, or you can pull out one of the guidelines. Okay. So you can use either a blank sheet. You can even put a blank sheet over the guidelines if you want. Now, let me just explain a little bit about the guidelines. So we have an X here. That X represents the height of our lowercase letters. Our M, our N, O, A, C, E, all of those letters go into this space up here. Okay, so we have our lowercase letters there. What we're going to, and so then we have another lowercase space here. In this middle area, we're going to practice our capitals. Okay, so our capitals are going to be in this wider part of our guideline. Again, if you prefer not to have the guidelines, that's okay. If any of you take a future class with me on any other calligraphy style, you'll find I'm a stickler about guidelines. So enjoy this one time that I'm not a stickler about guidelines. Okay, so we are talking about our capital letters. Our I through our F are simply practicing our full pressure stroke again, and then when I go to my no pressure stroke, I tip upwards. The I through the F use that same skill. For the K and the M, I'm using my full pressure stroke, and then I'm just drawing a thin, the legs of the K. Now, I'm going to follow this pattern of using a thick stem stroke and then using a no pressure stroke. Where it starts to change is on the letter A and Z. So you might notice that on the A and Z, up here we have a note that says we want to point the pen to the upper left. The I through the D, our pen has been pointed to the left side, or if you're left-handed, it's been pointed to the right side. But now that we're getting into the diagonals, we need to change the angle of the point of our brush just a little bit, okay? Because if I stay straight across and I try doing a diagonal stroke, it's a little bit harder to get a consistent beginning and end of my diagonal line. So what I want to do is I'm now pointing to the upper left, pressing fully, pulling down, and then lifting up. Okay. And then I'm going to do that again with my Z. I'm pointing to that upper corner. A lefty is going to be pointing to the lower right corner. And then our diagonal letters, the V through the Y, you'll see that the pen changes again. Now we're going to point downwards to the lower left corner. So now I'm going to point to the lower left corner and then just do my thin stroke. My lower left corner and then do the thin stroke. So what I want you to do now is I want you to do I through Y on the exemplar. So we're going to just take a little bit of time and write the I through the Y. If you're having if you want me to demonstrate a letter, please put that in the chat. If you have questions, please, this is a great time to do that. While everybody's getting started with using the pen, this is a great time to ask some questions if they're coming up.
Debbie, someone is requesting that you maybe do one line at a time.
Of the letters?
Yes.
Okay, I am happy. I will absolutely letter with all of you guys. I'm happy to do that. So for those of you who might be working with a pencil, I just want to briefly just touch on that a little bit. So that way, as I'm drawing, I'm just learning to draw a thick line and then a thin line. Okay, so the capitals are fairly easy as far as drawing these letters, but it's, as you see from the skeleton of just drawing letters, you can start to imagine all the amazing things that can start happening in these open spaces. You know, you can use colored pencils, you can sketch, you can shade, you can draw animals, you can, you know, just do something simple like draw stars around it. You can start to imagine it just by drawing these letters. You've got a lot of possibilities of where you can go with it.
One other question, Debbie. Someone is asking, how do you know the width of capital letters?
Ah, yes. Well, we could get technical and we could talk about the Roman caps and their traditional proportions. but I'd like to just open the door to experimenting, because I can make a bee feel totally different if I follow something that maybe is a little more traditional proportions, to if I start changing the width and the height of the letter. So one of the wonderfully forgiving things about the modern calligraphy is that I can, from the very beginning, I can start stretching and playing and shifting these different proportions of the letters. I can make it taller and skinnier, which kind of goes, you know, what is so wonderful about hand lettering is that I can give it a totally different emotion by how I change the proportions. I can make it go from feeling like it's happy and, bubbly, to making it almost feel like it's angry, depending on how I write it. So the beauty of the hand lettering is that it really is an opportunity to experiment and allow yourself to play with the different elements that you can do with it.
We also have a question about the light strokes.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you start the line? How do you get the light strokes to line up on the top and bottom of a letter, like I?
So this is one of those things where, so on here, I had a hit and I had a miss. There's two ways I can handle it. One, I can go, woohoo! I'm not a computer and I don't have to make everything connect. If I want to be really precise with it, I could always go in and I can draw it and nobody's going to be any the wiser. But I'd like to encourage everybody tonight to celebrate the fact that you guys are not machines, and you don't need to have your letters look like they're machine made. That your thins are going to have variation, your thicks are going to have variation. There's going to be where, I've got, my thin is thinner here and my thin is thicker here. That's okay. That's partly what the gift of your hand is creating, is because it's in that gift of yourself, it's in that gift of variation that gives the letters life. So those kind of perfections or imperfections are what make it human and what make it totally different than what a mechanized device can do. All right, so we've got a lot of ground to cover. So I want to talk about the next set of letters. Okay, so we did I through Y. The next set of letters, now we're starting to introduce that third skill. So remember we had the three skills, the full pressure stroke, the no pressure stroke, and now we have the third one of the taper. And that's where we need to start making a transition from full pressure to lifting up where I have no pressure. I'm a big fan of literally lifting the brush off the paper before going up into a thin stroke. Okay, what that means is that it makes it a little less likely that I'll accidentally carry that weight into my thin stroke. Okay. All right, so for the U, I'm going to work a little bit larger than what the guidelines will allow me to do in hopes that you guys can see it better. All right, so for the U, we start with that full pressure stroke, and then I'm lifting up. So I have my taper right there, and then I go into my thin. Then I'm going to do a full pressure all the way down. I only want you to do 1, maybe 2 letters before you move on to the next letter. I don't want you to do 5 or 6. 5 or 6 of the same letters. I've been teaching now for about 15 years, and most of the time, the first or second attempt at a letter is usually your best one. But that's why we put these letters together, is that way once I'm done with the U, I'm going to practice that same skill with the J. So 1, I don't want you to get bored by doing 5 or 6 J's. Okay. So we've got the U and the J, and then we've got our curved letters, the S through the Q. So for these, now we're going to point towards that upper left corner. Okay, it's kind of similar to the A and the Z. For the lefties, you're going to point downward. So for the curved letters for S, we've got 2 tapers. Here I start full pressure. I'm going to taper. I'm no pressure. I'm going to come into my thin, and then I'm going to gradually add pressure as I come into this stroke, into the bottom of the S. I can add a little hash mark at the beginning of the S. And then I'm going to practice that same skill with the letter C. So all these round letters are going to start the same way. Full pressure, I'm coming into a taper, and I get to practice that several times. Full pressure, I'm going to turn that C into an E. So we have a couple variations of the letter E that we can do. I can turn that crescent shape into a G. And then I've got the O. And then I can turn my O into a Q. This is where I change my direction of my pen. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about the position of your paper. One of the things that is really helpful, I'm not just moving the paper for your benefit, so that way my writing area is in the screen. It's really important that as I write, I'm always writing in a comfortable spot. Whether it's in the center of my body, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, I want you to be in a comfortable spot. But what happens is that sometimes I can get so focused on lettering that all of a sudden my hand's way over here and my arms tucked up against my body, and I'm like all rigid and stiff, and I'm having a hard time. I'm not comfortable with my writing. Or I could be like going, and all of a sudden my hand is way over here in the distance. And what happens is that my hand hold here would feel totally different than my hand hold here or my hand hold down here. So rather than constantly having to adjust my pen hold, it's much, much easier to always have your paper in motion. So that way, as I move across my paper, I am going to be moving my paper, not my hand. All right, so we want to move my paper, not my hand. All right, so what I want you to do is make sure you try all these capital letters. Okay. And once you've tried every letter once, try working in short words. Put little short words together. Go, to, fad, whatever it is, and just put little words together. We'll spend another few minutes on this lettering the capitals, and then we'll start talking about, we'll do a little fun project with the capitals.
Okay, Debbie, we have a comment. I missed where to point the pen for the tail on the Q.
Good question. All right, so on the Q, so we've got the O, I point to the lower corner. Now that's for a right-handed. A left-handed person would actually be pointing towards the upper left. Or the other thing, for lefties, be also aware that maybe rotating the paper might help for your pen position. The other thing is that when I pull a horizontal, I tend to go left to right. But a lefty might find it a little bit more comfortable if I'm pulling right to left. So the main thing is that for lefty and the modern calligraphy, the wonderful thing is that you're not working with a rigid pen angle like you do with traditional calligraphy. And so, like, my letters are starting with this little angle. It's okay if a lefty has a, slightly different angle. It doesn't need to start exactly in the same way as mine does, as a right-handed does, because it's such a forgiving lettering style that we've got a lot of flexibility on it.
Here's another comment from a lefty. I don't know if you've covered this already. Do you have any tips for lefties doing thins on the letters as we're writing the forms in reverse, pushing the tip rather than pulling?
I'm always a big fan of avoiding the push if at all possible. So that's why it might take some experimenting to figure out which way it feels comfortable, so that way you're not pushing it, I'm sorry. So that way you're not pushing the tip on it. With this tool, you can push or pull because it's a marker. But if you do fall in love with the lettering style and start using a brush, if you try to push with a brush, you're going to have more difficulties with it. So just getting in the habit of trying to find a way that you are pulling it rather than pushing it can be worth a little bit of extra challenge, a little bit of extra figuring out.
Okay, I think you covered this already, but if you wouldn't mind repeating, for the thick stroke, do you recommend going back to fill it in if I didn't get it right the first round?
You are absolutely welcome to fill in. There is no problem about that. Like, oh boy, that didn't come out right. You are more than welcome to fill it in. It's a very forgiving lettering style, and nobody's looking over your shoulder. So
We have
go
a
ahead.
question about the letter G. is,
Okay.
is the downstroke of the tail the full pressure stroke?
The downstroke of the tail. Yes. So let's see. So this one, we've got the crescent where we're doing a taper stroke. And then where we've got this second stroke, it's going to be a full pressure here. And then we'll do a no pressure stroke for the crossbar on the G. I'm not sure if that's called the crossbar, but that's the term. I can't. All right, so what I want you to all to do is I want to have you move into a little mini project. Grab a clean sheet of paper if you would, please. And I want you at the top of your paper, I want you to just draw maybe 4 full pressure strokes. And then make it like a swirly fence. Do 2 or 3 lines in between all of those full pressure strokes. Okay. Now, we'll see how many of you guys remember what is so special about the sentence, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." It might have been decades since you've heard that classic sentence, but the quick brown fox is what's called a pangram, and it's where the entire alphabet is in a single sentence. So what's great about that when you're learning a lettering style is that I can do one sentence and I know I have practiced the entire alphabet. So what I want you to do is, under this fun little border you've created, I want you to letter the pangram, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." Okay? Because it's really only by working in words that you can really start figuring out where to place letters next to each other. And so by having that practice of where you're writing in words, you start visually figuring out where does one line go next to the other. Because there are so many combinations, it's really impossible for me to teach where one letter might start next to another. So by practicing in words, you'll actually not only develop your lettering skills, but you'll develop your what's called kerning, the spacing that goes between the letters.
I'm going to throw another question at you because you might be doing this letter. On the curves, does the thin go up from where the full pressure taper ended? For example, O.
Oh, so like on this one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can see I ended up carrying a little bit of thickness up into my thin stroke there. And that's probably because I didn't fully lift my brush off of the paper. And so I wasn't fully released with my pressure. So that's probably a little bit of carryover. It's one of the reasons why I do like to do a full stop when I get to the end of my taper. So that way when I go into my thin, I'm less likely to have that happen.
And just as an aside, Debbie, someone is asking, do you use this style for everyday writing?
Well, it is fundamentally, and once we get to the lowercase letters, it's fundamentally based on cursive. These capitals, because they are not linked, are based a little bit more on just your traditional Roman caps. But again, that's a bit of a stretch to say they look like they're related to Roman caps. I'm not sure I answered the question.
Okay, I have 2 more questions right now. What brand of paper is best used for practice?
The beautiful thing about your marker is that just good old bond paper, Xerox paper will work extremely well. There's no bleeding with it. So you don't need to invest. If you're practicing, again, I'm a big fan of trying to leave not cut down trees for paper, grab paper and just use the other side of it. And to be able to practice, because by just doing things that practice your skill, you're going to get more and more comfortable with it.
Okay, I just noticed you did a different E there.
Good observation.
And someone is requesting that you please do the Q again.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see here. Instead of, we're going to say dog, what are we going to call it? Squid jumps over the lazy squid. Okay, so you get to see the transitions of the S, the tapers. Now for the Q, so I'm going to just fundamentally do the O. And then I'm going to really change dramatically the point of my pen. I'm really pointing strongly down towards my lower corner. And I'm coming up. It's almost like we're giving it a mustache here. We're coming up, we're giving it a thin with pressure, and then we come up again. So we kind of go up and down a little bit with it. Okay. Now, the main thing I hope you guys all remember is that even if you're finding this to be very challenging, you're finding it a little frustrating, is that magically your brain is making connections with your muscles, okay? And so it's so important that even if you're doing something that you find frustrating or difficult, rest on it, sleep on it, come back and try it again. It is miraculous how next time you touch this again, your muscles and brains, your neurons will have figured out some of the challenges, and it will get just that much easier. And every time you do that, you work, you rest, you come back. It's amazing how that starts to just gradually build and everything gets just a little bit easier. So all of you guys have to promise that no matter how you feel about class tonight, you're going to come back and play with it again. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how to decorate letters, because again, practice is great, but if we don't find ways to have fun with the lettering, you're not likely to keep practicing. Okay. So how can we make these one color letters? How can we dress them up? This is just a super simple highlighter. There is nothing fancy about this tool. The ideas I'm going to present can be done with a pencil. It can be done with a colored pencil. It can be done with a marker. There is nothing fancy or terribly technical about it. But so here's just 4 quick ideas on how you can dress up your letters. Okay, so the first one is to just simply draw a colorful line through the center of your lettering. And then here, we've just added some stars. Okay, just a little colored pencil. You can just use regular pencil. But one of the fun things about starting to add color is that, well, sometimes when I'm learning, my letters don't come out so great. So I love the impact of the color that it has. It can be a distraction for the eye. It can be a way to hide a problem. It can be a way that it diminishes, a less than perfect letter. Okay? Not that there ever is a perfect letter. Okay, so the second idea of ways of adding color is to simply color in these enclosed shapes. There are some letters that enclose in areas. Now, I might be using a highlighter, which is a modern tool, but the concept of coloring inside these counters, that's what these closed areas are called, is ancient. The Book of Kells from the 800s in Ireland uses this technique all over, where the uncial lettering style is very round. It has a lot of these beautiful circular spaces. And so what they've done in many of those circular spaces is they've just added colors. Okay, so that's just a simple, easy technique. The next thing is to just simply add some color on the background. Okay, it creates some visual interest. It makes it a much stronger design. And then the other one is to add a shadow. Okay, so on the shadow here, I almost always pretend that I've got light coming from the upper left. Nobody has to do it from the upper left all the time, but there's different ways to create the shadow. I can do a nice thick stroke. When I do a nice thick stroke, it ends up feeling like I'm adding dimension to my letters. Or if I do a thin kind of quick stroke, what happens is that it doesn't necessarily feel like dimension, but it can make it feel like the letters are in motion. So there are different ways that you can add a shadow to your letters. Okay, it can be nice and thick. And again, graphite works beautifully using just a pencil with on the side of your letters to create some dimension. Okay. Now I'm going to keep plowing on because time goes really fast and we've got a lot to still cover. Okay, so I want you guys to pull out your lowercase alphabet. Okay, so that's our next step in the learning process. And this is where we are going to work on the third skill. We're going to get a lot more practice with our taper stroke. We started working with the taper on that, the lower part of the capitals, the U through the Q, okay? But now we're going to do more of that with the lowercase letters. Now you'll see up at the top, we've got a reminder of the Palmer cursive, okay? That's the classic letters that are connected by a single line, okay? Now, when we do the modern calligraphy, we do pick up the pen. So you will find that there is points where we pick up and lift off. Even though it might look like a continuous stroke, it doesn't mean that it is. So what I've done on this top line is we've broken it down into the different strokes that we're going to see in the lowercase letters. So I'm going to do it kind of large so that way you can see a little bit better. So our first stroke is going to just be a thin connecting stroke. Okay, so that's our first stroke. Our second stroke, we are starting with full pressure, and then I'm tapering. I'm ending in no pressure, and then coming up. So I'll do that real time. Full pressure, taper with my thin. Now the next stroke, we've got that right here. We are going to go from thin, and then I'm going to add pressure. I'm going to go thin, and I'm going to add pressure. So we've got a taper up at the top. Here we had a taper at the bottom. Next, we're going to combine those two. We're going to go thin, taper, thick, taper, and then exit out. And then the last skill is the dot. Okay, so the dot letters are your R through your W on your exemplar. So let's see here. I'm going to draw guidelines just so you can see it a little bit more. But I'm going to come up into my R. I'm going to go above my waistline. And then I'm going to come down with pressure in that really teeny tiny space. And then I'm going to do full pressure, taper, and no pressure. I'll do that a little more real time. Up, above the line, press down from my dot. I'm in my thin, so I fully release my pressure there. And now I'm going to do my full pressure to my taper. Okay. So that goes you through all the different strokes that are going to equal these letters. I want you to work on I through Z. I will be lettering those if you prefer to observe. If you want to start lettering, go ahead and start lettering I to Z. We're going to tackle the round letters at the bottom separately in a few minutes, okay?
Debbie, I have a question, but I think this refers to the capital letters,
Okay.
which was, let's see. It asked about the order of the heavy and the light strokes. Do you always do the heavy strokes first in a letter, then the light ones after?
With the capitals, yes. I usually like to have the anchor of the stem stroke. You'll see that that does change a little bit on the lowercase letters when we have the connecting stroke where we're coming in with a thin. Now, that said, for people who are lefties, they might find it's, or even right-handed, could be both, where it's easier for them to do the light first. I just find I tend to get a little more free with my thin strokes so they can get a little off kilter or they can get a little crazy or, and so by having at least my stem in a set place, it enables me to know that at least I know that that is centered and balanced.
And someone is asking, I'm wondering if you are resting your hand on the paper or hovering over the page.
Great question. I am resting on the paper and my hand is sliding as I do my letters. Because what happens is that if I find I create my letters with my fingertips, I end up, so if I start with the thick and I create, if I'm using my fingers, I end up, it becomes very hard to create a consistent width as I draw it. Where if my hand slides, rests on the paper and slides down, it's much easier for me to control the quality of the line.
And then someone is asking, is there a kit I can buy to start?
I am sure there are kits out there. I am a huge fan of the website, the calligraphy supplier John Neal Books. I can quickly, let's see here. I can let me put that in the chat a little bit later. Neal is Neal, John Neal Books. But they are a wonderful supplier of calligraphy equipment. Now, I will say I do have, for those who are enjoying this and want to take a deep dive into the modern calligraphy, I do have an upcoming 6-week class where we'll be doing projects with the modern calligraphy. We'll be learning different variations of the modern calligraphy and really exploring how to make the letters dance. All the stuff that I can't quite fit into a 90-minute program.
And just to go back to that previous question about resting your hand, someone is asking, so the heel of your hand is resting?
Great question. I do find that it is mostly up here. Like, let me see here. I often like to have a cotton glove on my hand when I am doing high quality projects. And so you can kind of see where my rub spots are, where the cloth has worn off. That's where I tend to rest. It's actually more probably at the top of my fingers than necessarily at the bottom. But again, this whole area tends to touch the paper. I love all these questions, you guys. I'm really thrilled to be able to address these. It's one of the things I love about being able to have this interaction with all of you. Annie's helping me because with me looking down at the paper, I can't see everything that's going on in the chat. So I really find these questions to be really helpful.
Well, you'll love this comment then. Someone said, your hand is so steady, I bet you could be a surgeon.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, so this is confession time, guys. When I was growing up, there was a game called Operation. And it was this cartoon body, and it had these cutouts, and you had these plastic bones that you had to extract from the cartoon body. And what happened for me is that every time I would try to reach down and get out one of those plastic bones, I would shake and I would touch off the buzzer, go, you know, it drove me nuts. And I was like, okay, as a kid, I was like, well, okay, I'm never going to be a surgeon because my hand shakes too much. So you guys might be scratching your heads. So how does one go from having a shaky hand to being a professional calligrapher? Well, fundamentally, it's because a lot of what I've done over the years has been working with a metal nib. So here's a sample of a copper plate metal nib. Okay. But even when I use the broad edge tool, I've got a solid metal point. And so what I discovered is that by having that metal point, it steadied me. And so even though I do tend to have a shaky hand, I was able to create stability by being able to press on the metal nib. And to be honest, coming to the brush with my calligraphy has taken me a long time because I just was really timid about doing it because I was always like, oh no, I've got a shaky hand. But it has evolved and it's become easier the more I've done it for it. I also want to show you something else. Okay, so if you are finding it challenging to get the thicks and the thins, I want to show you something a friend of mine, Margaret Susie, sent me last fall. And she's a wonderful calligrapher. But I want to show you something about her letters here, is that she's done 3 different lines on her letters. She's got just straight verticals and horizontals, but she's not trying to get variation on the letter. So she doesn't have thicks and thins. She's got thicks, okay, but she's added color around them. So I want you to know that even if you are struggling with creating the thicks and the thins, don't give up, okay? Because even when you just use one thickness on your letters, there is so much you can do to play with your lettering and to make it interesting, okay? All right, I'm really good at getting a detour. So I want to make sure you get through the whole alphabet. So I want to get through the C, through the Q, and talk a little bit about that.
Debbie, can we take a slight detour? There are some people struggling with the lowercase m and n, and someone is asking you to please show her how to dot the I and J, please.
All right. So I'll tackle the easy one first. Well, and you guys I might be driving you nuts with my answers because I give you sometimes more than one answer. All right, so for the I, there's different ways we can do it. I can go right up on my tip, and I can make a very precise filled in dot where it's really nice and round. I can also do a dot where I'm just doing a quick circle, okay, a playful circle on it. I can also do a dot where I flick. So I can either start at the top and flick down, or I can create a dot where I start at the bottom and flick up. I hope you guys are starting to see that there's a lot of flexibility in where you go with the letters and what you can do with it. Now on the M, so for the M, now I'm going to do a cursive M first, where we've got our entrance stroke, we're thin. And then as I come over the top, I've hit my maximum, I'm at the height of the wavelength. I'm going to come down and I'm going to start pressing down. So I've got a taper up in this upper right corner. Then what I like to do is I actually start inside the stem stroke. So I'm inside this dark stroke before I come out, and then creating another taper up at the top. So again, I start inside the stem, inside that thick stroke, and then I'm coming out with my arch, tapering. I've got the taper at the top and then the taper at the bottom. Okay, and then N is going to be just one crest of the wave here. I'm starting inside that thick. I'm stopping when I get to that taper at the bottom so I can have a full thin on my way out. Okay. Now, I just want to say, if you don't like the connecting stroke of the cursive, there is no problem with just doing individual letters. You do not have to do a cursive version of the modern calligraphy. You can do it where the letters are not connected. And the other thing I want you guys to know is that you guys, because of the camera and because of the distance and everything else, you guys just can't see the shakes in my letters. Because I will tell you, my letters are unsteady. And if you can't see them, that's okay. But you also have to realize that when other people are going to look at your letters, they are not going to look at it as closely as you are. So anybody who's writing the letters is going to be ultra aware of where you can see what you like and what you don't like. But most people, when they view a word, aren't going to be having their noses right up against it and inspecting it. They're not like, did she get a crisp, perfectly even line? No, people aren't looking at it the same way we, as the creator of it, might be looking at it.
I don't know if we're going to have enough time to get to everyone's questions because Debbie really wants to finish teaching you all the letters. So I'm going to ask the last two questions, I think. One person is saying, my tips get dulled a lot. How do you fix that? And then someone is asking for help with the lowercase letter X.
Letter X. You know, I'm just grateful that we don't need the letter X very often. So what I find is I create, let's see here, like the backside of, so we've got that center of the X is almost straight up and down. And then for my X, I'm going to just really be really light. Sometimes I even draw myself a target. So sometimes you even okay, there's the halfway point. I'm going to give myself a target to try to hit it as I come crosswise over. If you want, if you can control it. Okay, so I've given myself a target. I can do a tiny bit of pressure at the top, release it, and a tiny bit of pressure at the bottom, or you can just do a thin all the way from top and bottom.
Debbie, I think he's asking to please demonstrate the angle of the nib for the first part of the lowercase letter X.
For the first part for the entrance stroke?
I believe so.
Okay. For the entrance stroke, because it's a thin, I do tend to be very upright with my tool. I'm very thin. And then as I hit the top, I'm at the crest of the curve, I'm going to start to shift it where I'm a little bit more sideways. I'm a little pointing more to the side, so that way I can move into the taper. Because it's hard to do the taper if I'm working at the top of my brush. All right, forgive me, Annie. I'm going to make sure I get to all the round letters here.
Okay, could you just talk a tiny bit about the tip getting dull?
Oh, yes. Okay, so the tip getting dull. The main thing to remember with a marker is that they are markers. They are a great place to start, but they are not going to last you that long. I find that after I use mine a few times, it gets more flexible, and I get more variation in the line. And that's okay for what I'm using it for. The main thing is that if you want to have something that's durable and more long-lasting, you want to go to something like a color brush, where you're going to be able to get more detailed lines. You'll have a lot more control over your tapers. So there are, if you're ready to be really detailed with your modern calligraphy, I highly recommend shifting to a water brush or a color brush, or even a paint brush. All right, so for those lowercase round letters, we've got our C through our cue. This is where I say try not to push the pen. Well, you know, what is it about all rules? All rules are meant to be broken. And so here we have a tiny push with the brush before we move into the taper of the letter. Okay. So I'm going to push the brush, push the marker just slightly, and then I'm going to gradually add pressure. So I'm taper, full pressure, taper. I find, for me anyway, this corner is the hardest to do with this marker, okay? So just realize, even with a lot of lettering experience, this is one of the hardest places to get an even taper, okay? But I'm gonna get to practice that on a lot of the letters. And if it doesn't come out the way you want it to, draw it. That's the beauty of it, is that even if it doesn't come out exactly the way I plan it to, if I've got kind of a choppy line, it's okay. Go back and color it in. Or just don't worry about it. Because again, we are not trying to be machines. The gift of our lettering is that it's an expression of who I am. And there's no such thing as perfect, so I don't need to try to put that kind of expectation on myself. Not that I, as a calligrapher, don't fall into that trap a whole lot of times. Being a stickler for detail serves me really, really, really well as a calligrapher. So I'm going to change my angle, my camera view, because I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about how you can use the calligraphy, okay? So I hope over the course of the class, of this workshop, that you're having a chance to see what happens when you really get absorbed and you're able to focus and really, put your mind to the task of lettering. Because one of the wonderful things I love about lettering is that it's challenging. And so it really requires a lot of concentration. And that can push all that chatter in my brain. It can help it be quiet for a little while. So in a lot of respects, having that opportunity to letter and really focus is kind of a little gift of meditation to myself. And so I really look forward to that time to just experiment. It doesn't even have to, my satisfaction with it isn't about the letters themselves and whether or not they came out the way they wanted to, but just about the time and space to be able to put the pen to paper for it. Now we've got Valentine's Day coming up. So one of the things I want to tell you is that so I got started with calligraphy by my 5th grade teacher. All right. Really, really, really incredibly blessed to get introduced to calligraphy at a young age, which is why one of the reasons why I've taught children as young as 5 years old all the way up into their 80s. And it's a real blessing that no matter where we are on our journey, letters are such a part of our life and our culture that it still is relevant no matter what our age is. So I had my 5th grade teacher introduce me to calligraphy. But the other important gift was that my mom, once I started doing calligraphy, she would feed me projects. So I grew up as a part of a 4-H club. And so my mom would be like, oh, I'm the 4-H leader. These certificates for the 4-H members need to be filled out. And so she would say, here, fill out the certificates. She would be, here, make these thank you cards for me. Here, write this poem for me. You know, she would give me projects. And if it weren't for those projects, I don't know if I'd be where I am. So even though you might just be on the beginning of the learning curve, some of you might even have decades of experience with calligraphy already, but just continue to make sure that you are finding ways to use your calligraphy and put it out in the world. So what I've done is I've created just a small handful of samples to show how simple it can be to use your calligraphy, okay, to actually start implementing this. And because we might be sending out cards to friends or loved ones, here's just a sample of where we have just 3 letters. You know, the nice thing about the modern calligraphy is that you're probably not going to write a really long text with it. Okay, you're just really going to highlight, use 1 or 2 words or initials or something like that. Here I've done just initials with a little bit of colored pencil. Okay. Here is a pink envelope where I've lettered with a purple marker, and then with a pink marker, a pink Tombow marker, I've just done those flick. We talked about the flick dots for the eye. I just created a flower or a star, whatever you might like it to be, with the flicks of the brush. Now, for those who might have been working with the pencil instead of the brush tonight, here's one where I've drawn the modern calligraphy and colored it in and created shading with a colored pencil. Not complicated, but just that little bit of variation, you know, makes a big difference. And then what I do for the addresses, I just write it. I'm not trying to do the whole address in modern calligraphy. I'm combining the modern calligraphy as a highlight. It's like a headline. And then the rest of the information is just written small in my regular hand. Here's just a name with simple stars going around it. I think there's a little bit of shadow on it. And making cards. I'm a huge fan of making cards because, again, we live in a world which tells us buy, 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 buy. Buy stuff, buy stuff, buy stuff. And you know, that's partly what's gotten us disconnected from each other. And so I really want to encourage you guys to try a process where you're just putting yourself into something. This is simply a piece of heavier paper. The blue dots in the background is wrapping paper. This is another piece of leftover wrapping paper. This picture of the trees came from an annual report or a magazine, and then I've lettered directly on top of it. Okay, so I'm not spending a lot. I'm not having to go out and buy fancy resources. I'm simply using what I have. Here's another example. Again, just a little bit of cardstock. This background layer is from a magazine cover. The green is an old envelope. That's also an image from an annual report. And then there's just a little piece of leftover watercolor paper that's been lettered on. And with St. Valentine's Day coming up, we've got, of course, something that's relevant to that. Okay. The main thing, whether you make yourself, if you're making dinner for yourself and you want to make it special, make yourself a little place card. Write a letter of encouragement to yourself in your modern calligraphy. Just keep finding ways to use it. Because again, we know in this world that what we say and what we put out into the universe matters. And I want to just encourage you to continue to do that. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. It's really been an honor to do that.
Thank
So-
you so.
I'm happy to answer questions, Annie, but again, you guide me as far as how you'd like to handle.
I don't know if we have enough time to answer all the questions. Maybe one question is, would there be any problem with the post office in sending those handwritten envelopes that you showed us?
A year ago, I would say no. The last year has changed things a little bit. I don't know if it's just some flukes. You know, I'm hoping it's just really temporary for it. The main thing is that when you do write the street address and the town, state, and zip code, make that really clear. A lot of it is done by electrical scanner. So if that is really clear, it's going to end up in its destination.
I think we put Debbie's website in the chat box. You also have it on the handouts that you downloaded and printed, and you might find answers to some of the questions that we couldn't cover today there. So thank you so much, Debbie, for your wonderful and inspiring program. Thanks to everyone for viewing the LA Made program today. Remember to please check out the library's online calendar at lapl.org. The next LA Made will be Thursday, February 11 at 4 p.m. Thank you again for watching, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.